Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. Today is Tuesday, December the 7th. It's 10:03 a.m. We're here today for a allowable ex parte briefing from Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioners Jay Williams, Caston, Powers, Belzer, C. Williams, and Thomas. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin. Attorney Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, and all those who are present today in person and virtually. Today is Tuesday, December the 7th, 2021, and we are here in the Commission's hearing room pursuant to a notice of request for an allowable ex parte briefing from Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated for a briefing as outlined in Commission Order Number 2021-694. The subject matter notice to be discussed at the briefing today relates to the cost of gas on natural gas prices and electricity prices and its impact on customers. Dominion shall present information to the Commission of this allowable ex parte briefing on the following items. 1. Overview of natural gas rates and rate making in South Carolina. 2. Current wholesale gas prices, trends and the cause of those trends. 3. Impacts of gas price trends to purchase gas adjustments, as PGAs, by the customer group. 4. Impacts of economic changes on rates via the Rate Stabilization Act, which is RSA, and the cost of gas for electricity. Customer impacts by increasing gas prices, how the Public Service Commission and utilities can help keep gas prices low or down. Messaging, rate changes. This is, I would remind everyone, a briefing and not a hearing. The briefing must be conducted in compliance with the provisions of South Carolina Code 4-58-260C, and the requirements of that statute are, in part, that the allowable ex parte briefing be confined to the subject matter which has been noticed. I therefore ask the presenters, Commissioners, and staff all please refrain from discussing any matters not related to this specific topic. The statute prohibits any presenter, commissioners, or commission staff from requesting or giving any commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner or the commission as to any ultimate or penultimate issue which either is or is likely to come before the commission. I would ask the presenters, staff, and commissioners to refrain from referencing any report, article, statute, or document of any kind that are not included in today's presentation. A copy of any document which is referenced during the briefing must be provided to ORS for inclusion into the record, which will be certified to the Chief Clerk of the Commission, Ms. Jocelyn Boyd. If anyone during the course of this briefing exceeds the scope or does not comply with or fails to conduct themselves within the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-326-260 governing allowable ex parte briefings, is expected for a contemporaneous objection to be made. And finally, everyone in attendance today, in person or virtually, must sign in or register. Everyone in the hearing room or watching live virtually must also read, sign, and return the form which you were given at the door when you came in today, or the form which will be emailed to you for your virtual appearance, which will include instructions and the deadline for form return. It is required by law for each attendee, whether attending virtually or in person, to certify that the requirements contained in Section 58-326-C have been complied with in this presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Stark. I'd like to recognize the parties just so we know who we have present here with us in the room. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, Vice Chair Belzer, members of the Commission. Nicole Hare on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hare. Attorney Hare, excuse me. Dominion Energy, South Carolina.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Chad Burgess, and I'm Corporate Counsel for Dominion Energy, South Carolina.
Thank you, Attorney Burgess. All right. Dominion Energy, South Carolina, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, we are, Mr. Chairman. And to begin with, we want to thank the commission for opening up its doors, allowing us to come over here and appear before you in person. It's been too long. So we are happy to be before you live. I did want to introduce our panel today to you. To begin with, we have John Raftery. He is the Director of Rates. Alan Rooks is the Manager of Rates, and Rose Jackson is the Director of Gas Supply Services for the company. So John is going to begin the presentation. We've got about 25, 26 slides, and there's some transition between the various topics that you've asked us to address, so you'll see those as we get through the slide deck. Feel free to interrupt the presenters at any time. If you have a question or if you want to wait till the end to ask your questions, that's fine too. We're here at your pleasure, and we want to make sure that you get all the information that you're looking for through this proceeding. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to John Raftery and ask him to begin the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. And my preference is that the presenters are allowed to make their presentations and that we hold questions until the end. All right, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, all the commissioners, it is wonderful to see you here in person. I'd like to compliment the commission staff for the setup here today. It's a whole different experience to be here in person than to watch proceedings on a small computer screen. So I'd like to thank you for having us here in person and for the precautions that you put in place to have Dominion Energy here this morning. So thank you very much. With me today is Mr. Alan Rooks. As Mr. Burgess indicated, he's an expert in electric pricing and the electric fuel generation matters for the company, as well as Ms. Rose Jackson, who's an expert from the gas supply side. We've organized today's presentation according to the Commission's order. The 9 subject areas that you see on the screen are from the order. We've recognized that certain subject areas have a certain amount of overlap. Therefore, you might find a collection of slides that addresses multiple subject areas. I also want to mention that the company reviewed last week's business meeting and recognized that today's allowable ex parte certainly is for the benefit of the commission, but to the extent that there are others watching, like customers, we felt it would be beneficial to work these slides that are a little more meaningful for customers. Therefore, to the extent that you might find something that is more basic or rudimentary, we'd ask for your forgiveness and recognition that we did that mostly for customers. I've got the clicker for the entire presentation. I'll try to be prudent with your time. So let's start with an overview of the natural gas rates and rate making in South Carolina. As this commission knows, there are really 3 basic components to natural gas rates here in South Carolina. I will discuss each in subsequent slides, but in order to make sure we get the nomenclature correct, I wanted to start with some acronyms that we often use for different components. The first is there's the base rate. That is addressed through the annual Rate Stabilization Act, or RSA, proceeding. The second is the weather normalization adjustment, commonly referred to as WNA. And the third item is the purchased gas adjustment, or PGA. It's also referred to as the cost of gas often. So in case I use one interchangeably, hopefully you'll find this slide helpful. Obviously, the PGA component is the primary focus of today's allowable ex parte. So let's just start first with what is RSA. It was enacted by the state legislature in 2005, and it's applicable only to natural gas companies in the state. It does not apply to electric utilities or water or sewer. It is designed to generate the amount of revenue needed to recover the cost of service, and that cost of service is really 2 different buckets. The first bucket are operating costs, and the second bucket is a return of and on rate base. Operating expenses include such things as repairs and maintenance to the system, certain administrative activities like human resources, accounting, finance, the regulatory group, depreciation on assets, and certain taxes such as property taxes and income taxes. Those make up the broad bucket of operating expenses. Rate base, on the other hand, includes such items as additions or improvements to assets. And think about service mains or service lines to customers' homes or meters, those sorts of physical assets. It also includes materials and supplies for the employees to conduct their business each and every day, Other items like accumulated depreciation reserves and accumulated deferred income taxes are just a few examples of the items that make up the rate base. These rates are really implemented via two components on a customer's bill. First is a basic facilities charge, and for our residential customers, the basic facilities charge is $10.90 per month. That is fixed, and that is intended to cover really customer service related cost of service. Things like the call centers, things like our phone system, things like our website, items such as metering and billing and remittance. That's what the basic facilities charge is largely designed to capture. The second item is the base rate, not to be confused with a fuel base rate. This is, again, to address those items under operating expenses and rate base, and it is charged on a per therm or per decatherm basis. I think everyone knows that a decatherm is simply 10 therms, and it's just dependent on which rate schedule you're on, how you are charged. I wanted to mention that the RSA is an annual proceeding. The company just went through it with its filing in June, an ORS report in September, a stipulation, and rates go into effect in November. 4 out of the last 10 years, the rates have stayed steady or gone down. 6 of the last 10 years in those proceedings, rates have gone up. So just to give you kind of some context, that the RSA proceeding doesn't always mean a rate increase. Sometimes they stay steady, sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. Moving on to the second item, the weather normalization adjustment. It was implemented by Commission Order 91-971 in 1991. It was subsequently modified very slightly in subsequent orders by this commission, but it is designed to stabilize customer bills and utility revenues in cases of extreme weather. So it's only applicable during the winter months of November through April. It's also only applicable to those rate schedules that are sensitive to weather. So there are 2 rate schedules you see in front of you. They're the residential rates 32S and 32V, and commercial rates 31 and commercial rate 33, sorry. Fundamentally, at a high level, WNA is designed if weather is normal, and that's based off of the 30-year average according to NOAA, rates are not adjusted upward or downward. However, if the winter weather is colder than normal, and customers are using more natural gas, the base rate is actually reduced some by this WNA factor that has a tariff sheet. It also has a special spot on our website where there's a tutorial, a video for customers to understand how WNA works on their bill. And then lastly, if the winter weather is warmer than normal, the WNA factor adjusts the base rate slightly upward. The third and final component of rates is the purchase gas adjustment. It recovers the cost of natural gas, and there are 2 components to the cost of natural gas. Namely, there's the commodity, which are the molecules of gas themselves, and then there's the demand. And the demand is the ability and the actual execution of getting that gas here via transportation, certain storage assets, and then the company has 2 liquefied natural gas assets. The PGA is examined by the company every month, and every month we'll look at the over and under recovery of the commodity, the over and under recovery of demand, and then we'll look at the forward-looking 12-month price forecast for natural gas. In that examination, we will determine a new cost of gas factor. If that cost of gas factor is within 4 cents of the current cost of gas, no changes are made to the rates. They stay steady. If it's more than 4 cents, rates are adjusted upward. If it's less than 4 cents, rates are adjusted downward. And I'd like to say that that's a good thing. What it really minimizes is any sort of rate shock. There's a constant examination of the rate and adjustments throughout the year. I also wanted to share with you that this year, 3 months, the rate has actually increased. It was in July, August, and October. 2 months this year, the rates decreased. Those were in February and May. In 7 months this year, the rates stayed steady. There was no need to change the rates, including December and including November. So the current rate schedules in place for the cost of gas have stayed the same October, November, December, but there has been a thoughtful examination of the increasing cost of gas and if that trigger of the 4 cents caused a change in rates. Unfortunately, it did not. Lastly, I wanted to mention that the cost of gas, there is no profit, there is no markup. It is a direct pass-through to customers. Moving to our second subject area, I'll hand it over to Ms. Rose Jackson.
Good morning. It's so good to see y'all in person. I wanted to start off with, next slide. Okay. Oh, no. I want to give a brief overview of how we deliver natural gas to South Carolina. And here we took a map of the lower 48 states, the shale plays that exist today. I know there's been a lot of discussion associated with the shale plays in the U.S., and we're very blessed to have these natural geologic formations where we can find domestic supply. So if you see the map there, if we start in the Texas, Louisiana area and move up, the red line there is Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, and that moves from Texas all the way into New York. And then the purple colored lines there is Southern Natural Gas, which begins in Louisiana and dead ends in Aiken, South Carolina. Those are the two upstream pipelines that feed into Carolina Gas Transmission. And then Carolina Transmission, for the majority of our system here for DESC, delivers to the Dominion Energy South Carolina distribution system. CGT is represented in the bright blue. What this affords us the opportunity to do is we can purchase gas from both the Gulf region in that Texas, Louisiana area, both onshore and offshore, and also from that Marcellus region where you see represented by that light colored orange in the northeastern portion of the country. So we're very fortunate to be able to bring gas in from both sides of the Transco system. Okay. Is it not working? Okay, and then I wanted to go back and look at our average prices. These are the NYMEX historical prices that go back to 2005, and they look forward to 2027. And then we've also got the Energy Information Administration's annual energy outlook from this year, 2021. That outlook is published during the first quarter of each year. So this report was dated February 3rd of 2021, but this is an indicator of where the EIA sees prices going. However, when you look at how we update our PGA forecast, we use the NYMEX, and the reason for that is there are several forecasts for gas prices out there. However, the NYMEX is the long-term forecast where we can purchase financial positions at those prices. So the EIA, while it has a long-term forecast, there is not a method or a means where we can go out and purchase gas at those forecasted prices. So NYMEX is traditionally what we have used to indicate where prices will be going. And just to give you some information of how the volatility in natural gas has occurred over the last several years, you'll see beginning in 2005, prices were at that high level at almost to $9. We were recovering from Hurricanes Katrina and Rita that hit in late 2004. Then prices dropped down, but then in 2008, we had even more damaging hurricanes with Gustav and Ike, which caused another price spike that went to the $9 mark. And then you saw prices begin to drop off, and much of that was because the natural gas industry focused on taking those, taking the high prices and developing hydraulic fracking that would allow us access to domestic supply in those regions that we saw in the last map where we would have access to shale supplies. When I got into the gas industry back in 1992, everybody kept saying that we were going to run out of natural gas in about 10 years. And in the 2004 timeframe, imported liquefied natural gas from other countries was going to be the savior for our domestic natural gas supply needs. But with this technology we've known that these shale geologic formations existed. We just didn't have the drilling technology to get to those formations. So with the advent of that technology, we were able to access this new supply source right here in our country, which has given us an abundant supply source. And so then after that 2008 timeframe, you'll see that prices dropped off again until we hit this new weather concept called the polar vortex event. So many of you will recall how cold it was during January and February of 2014, and that's where we see prices take another spike up. After that, we had warmer than normal winter seasons, so you see that prices dropped off and began to level. 2018 was the second polar vortex event that occurred in our area, once again in that January, February timeframe. So you saw that prices took another little jump up, but then we didn't see extended cold periods, so prices began to stabilize. And then once again, prices dropped down to that $2 mark. But then this fall, let's go back to February of 2021. We encountered a polar vortex event that dipped lower than we had ever seen. It went into the Texas area. So many of you heard the reports of what happened in what they're calling the Texas polar vortex. Gas prices jumped up for a short period of time, but the aftermath of those price spikes continued to go on through that winter season. There was so much storage that was utilized during that time period. We're getting ready to talk more about where storage sits today and the impact of storage on natural gas prices. But that weather event and the duration of that weather event created the need for more physical storage to be utilized than it had in the previous 5 winters. So that coupled with the hurricane season that we had, that caused an increase in prices. So I want to go to the next one. There you go. So here's a summary of the U.S. storage. And what this shows, if you look at the wide gray area, that shows you where the average storages sit for the last 5 years. So at the high portion, that shows you the maximum level of storage, and then the lower area shows you the minimum. And then in the middle, you see the gray line. That is the 5-year average. And then the blue line shows you where our actual storages sit. And if you look back to the 2019 timeframe, we're underneath the 5-year average, but then we track it until we get into that 2020 timeframe, and we are above it all the way up until February of this year when the polar vortex event hit Texas. And then since that time, we have been lagging behind the 5-year average. So as we entered into this winter season, we were behind on the 5-year average of storage, which drove up demand for natural gas because utilities were still trying to fill their physical storages. That coupled with the active hurricane season that we had drove prices up to where we saw it. The prices for this previous year, let's see, when we go back to 2021, yesterday's close, we closed at $3.70, but our high price occurred on October 5th. It was at $6.31, while the low price occurred on January 22nd at $2.45. So you can see the dramatic range that we've seen just during this calendar year. I think that as we go through this winter season, every time we head into a winter season, everybody is concerned about what type of weather we're going to have. And if we have normal weather with our storage levels being below the 5-year average, that can cause natural gas prices to tick up. However, if we enter into that January timeframe, and if you look at the latest weather forecast, they are now calling for warmer than normal weather. then I think you'll see prices continue to come back down to a more stable level, to around that $3 mark, maybe slightly lower. So all this continues, natural gas prices do continue to be impacted by weather, by our storage levels, but also what type of demand we see, not just here in the U.S., but also globally. So if we can go to the next slide. And here you'll see we have had tremendous LNG exports from the U.S. to Europe and Asia, and the reason for that is when you look at what our prices are trading at, our forward price for January of 2022 is trading at $4.12. This was the closing prices as of December 3rd. And you can see that the European prices were trading at $32, $29, and then Asia, the Japan-Korea index, was at $34. So the demand for LNG worldwide has increased from the U.S., and we are exporting more LNG than we ever had. If you'll remember my comment from earlier, in 2004, we thought imported LNG was going to be the savior for our domestic supply needs, and now the U.S. has become an LNG exporter. So when you look at the increased demand for the winter season in Europe and Asia, that drives demand up for U.S. gas. However, Europe and Asia does not have the ability to store gas as we do in the U.S., so that gas will return back to us in the late spring and summer months so that we can begin to fill up our physical storages. And just an overall summary of where we sit in the natural gas market. The current impacts to natural gas pricing, once again, are being driven by our national storage levels. Recent hurricane events, when you look at Hurricane Ida that occurred in late August, 95% of oil and gas production was shut in during that time period. Hurricane Nicholas that occurred in mid-September also impacted both oil and gas production. So that, right before the winter season, also drove concerns associated with supply, and it also interrupted refilling of our physical storage. So the increased demand for exported LNG also creates additional demand that would drive prices up. So our prices that you saw during that October timeframe, we were sitting at the 2014 levels that we had with that first polar vortex event. And much of that was because of the aftermath of that Texas polar vortex event coupled with the active hurricane season, which prevented us from hitting our 5-year average storage levels. So all that worked together to drive prices up during that time frame. We believe that, once again, if we see warmer than normal weather, that prices will decline, and they have begun to decline. As you can see, we're trading around that $3.50 mark now. And if we don't see weather materialize to normal levels in January, we'll see it drop off again. Shale production, the ability to produce and supply more shale is there. However, the concern that we have in the natural gas industry today is how do we deliver that shale supply? There is a need for new pipeline capacity, but much of that capacity is going to require greenfield pipelines in order to ensure that supply can be delivered. In the past, we had said that the typical FERC timeline from the pre-filing application process to the in-service date of a new pipeline project was roughly 3 years. That was probably a timeline we would have given you 5 years ago. But now, as we look at the FERC timeline, we're looking at 5 to 7 years or longer. Not only is this created by FERC, longer timelines at the federal level, but also longer timeline for local permits. And there's continued opposition delays for construction, which drives up cost, and that attributes to higher cost of transportation and the uncertainty of when that transportation will be available to the marketplace. So all of that, with limited supply and increased demand, will drive up prices. I think that we will continue to see spikes. However, when you look at the long-term forecast that NYMEX has and the EIA has, we're going to have stable prices again. I'm just not sure that we'll get back down to that $2 mark. We may set a new lower level.
Thank you, Rose. Let's move on to our next couple sections. They are the impacts of natural gas prices to the PGA by customer group, and then a conversation about the RSA impacts to rates. I'd like to start by giving a representation of an average monthly residential bill for a Dominion Energy South Carolina customer. What you'll see on the screen is that the average monthly bill, and simply we took the average annual usage and then divided it by 12 to get a monthly bill, because obviously it changes throughout the year, would be about $66.11. Interestingly, and it kind of makes sense if you stop to think about it, over half of that bill is related to the fuel component itself. It is the cost of gas. We are just securing molecules of gas and passing it to the customer. There's no transformation process like on the electric side where you're buying fuel and turning it into electricity, which requires other assets on the system. That 52% is about $34.11. The remainder would be $32. That would be the non-fuel component. Think again about the RSA, or the Rate Stabilization Act. And also, you might recall I mentioned the basic facilities charge is $10.90 to cover that customer service, cost of service. So about a third of the non-fuel component for rates is captured via the basic facilities charge. This graph represents, over the last 16 years, how the NYMEX closing price tracks to the PGA commodity price. Again, remember PGA, cost of gas, two components, commodity, molecules, and demand, that transportation. This just shows the NYMEX closing prices against the company's PGA commodity prices. And we selected a 16-year period for two reasons. Number one, the Rate Stabilization Act, as you'll recall, was implemented in 2005. And then secondly, whether the PGA itself used to be an annual proceeding and moved to a monthly proceeding in 2006, was then adjusted in 2009 for that 4-cent threshold before, above and below. So it seemed to be a good period to capture both the RSA and changes in the PGA, and you'll see that theme through the subsequent slides. What I wanted just to call your attention to is a couple of things. You saw it on Ms. Jackson's slide, namely back in 2005, rates were significantly higher. Specifically in November of 2005, you can see that NYMEX price in blue, as well as the company's PGA commodity cost in red, they were significantly higher. You saw another large spike in June of 2008. However, as you work your way across the chart, and if you use the right side, the current commodity price, you'll see that we've been here before. We've been here before as recently as 2017, 2014, 2013, 2011, 2010, and 2009. We've hit about this price over half a dozen years over the last 16 years. The only other thing I wanted to call your attention to on this slide is that the PGA commodity component trails just a bit the NYMEX. Again, that kind of makes sense if you're doing this examination every month of the over and under recovery as well as future price forecasts. If you need to adjust it upward or downward, it kind of would trail those prices. So you'll see that the PGA commodity kind of tracks just a tick behind the NYMEX prices. This slide shares by customer class what the total PGA cost of gas is. As you would expect, the commodity charge is the same for all customer classes, but the demand component is specific to the demands that that customer class puts on the system. Each annual PGA prudency hearing, which the company just recently concluded in November, there's a redetermination or determination of the allocations to the different customer classes for demand. And it's made up both of what does that customer class demand on the system for a peak date, and then what is the total annual sales for that customer class. And that's that 50-50 weighting that drives how the demand costs are allocated to each customer class. It is difficult, I'm sorry, to see on the screens, and if you have a hard copy, I don't imagine it's much easier to read. But in the lower left-hand side, there is a table that gives a comparison for the PGA cost of gas over a 16-year period and over a year-over-year or 1-year period. What I'd like to call your attention to first is looking at the 16-year period. The cost of gas today is significantly less than it was in November of 2005. In fact, on a residential perspective, the PGA component is 32% less than it was back in 2005. On a commercial perspective, it's 40% less, and then on an industrial, it's 20%, if I squint my eyes enough to read that correctly. However, as we all know or would expect, year over year, that cost of gas is higher. For a residential, it's about 13%. Sorry, 15%. Commercial is 29%, and then industrial, it's 36%. But again, as you would expect, customers really don't talk cost of gas too much. They don't look at that component of their bill. They really talk about what is my total bill, how much am I paying to the utility for that service. And this examination keeps that 16-year examination as well as a 1-year examination and compares an average monthly bill to what it was 16 years ago. So on the top, you'll notice that today customers' total bill are paying $4.22 less than we're paying back in November 2005. That's a 6% decrease. Commercial customers are paying about 23% less on a monthly average bill, and then industrial's 13%. However, recognizing that the cost of gas has gone up over the last year, and we did have an RSA hearing or proceeding earlier, year over year rates are a bit higher. So just calling out the residential line on the second half, or the bottom half of the chart, you'll notice that this November's average monthly bill is $5.66 higher than it was last year in November. I'd like to inform the Commission that 77% of that, or $4.33, is directly related to PGA. The remainder is related to this year's RSA hearing. We'll now move over to the impacts of natural gas prices on electricity, and Mr. Rooks will take it from here.
Thanks, John. Good morning to all the commissioners, and I'll echo what John and Rose said. It's good to be back here with you in person today. So starting off, our first slide here with our a pie chart that you'll see is similar to what Mr. Rafferty spoke with you about from a gas perspective, but this is the residential bill. So currently for DESC customers, it is at $125.92. And that bill is based upon the recently approved and implemented rate case rates that went effective on September 1st of this year. And if you look at that 1,000 kilowatt hour residential bill, $26.32 currently is the portion of that bill that's associated with electric fuel costs. And so that makes up about 21% of the bill currently. And that fuel rate that you see there was approved earlier this year in the company's 2021 annual fuel proceeding. So taking this a step further, we just talked about electric fuel costs making up 21% of a residential bill. So now we're going into what makes up electric fuel costs. And so in this chart that I have here, I've got noted on the left that DESC's fuel costs in calendar year 2020 were about $484 million. And that's for base fuel costs. So that's the traditional fuel costs that we think of for coal, gas, oil, nuclear fuel, and purchased power. So about $484 million in calendar year 2020. Out of that total, about $190 million, or roughly 39%, was attributable to natural gas commodity costs. And so in 2020, our average purchase price for natural gas was $2.49 per decatherm. So as we shift over to the chart, I thought it might be informative for the Commission to kind of see how our different sources break out from a capacity and energy and a cost perspective. And so as you look at each line, the first column is our capacity mix for Dominion Energy South Carolina. And so you see there, nuclear represents about 12%, coal at 30%, and right down the column there. And then the next column is percentage of energy. So these are where we actually source the power, and this is where economic dispatch comes in. So each hour of each day, we're looking for the most effective mix of resources to ensure reliability and do so at the least cost. The final column that you see there is the percentage of cost. And again, this is all on a calendar year 2020 basis. So if you look at nuclear as an example, you can see that it makes up 12% of the capacity mix, but as far as the energy sourced out of nuclear, it makes up 22% of the energy supplied to Dominion Energy South Carolina customers in 2020, and 8% of the cost. So it's a very low cost, low variable cost resource. And so that's why you see it get dispatched the most, and it's base loaded year round as it's available. So coal, you can see, makes up 30% of the capacity mix. Maybe the variable costs were a little higher in 2020 for coal, and so we dispatched coal to meet 16% of the customer's energy needs in that calendar year. One thing that you see and you notice here with gas commodity and gas transportation is that the percentages are fairly consistent across all of the columns, and it makes up about 44% of our available dependable capacity. It makes up about 49% of the energy supplied, and then if you add the transportation and commodity, that's also at about 49% of the cost. So you can see that gas is very important to our system from an electric generation perspective. Next slide, John. So wanted to try to give you a general rule of thumb here, or give you a metric to kind of keep in mind as far as Dominion Energy South Carolina costs go. But based upon a calendar year 2020 gas dispatch, and I want to emphasize that we've stuck with our 2020 gas dispatch year because increases in commodities will have varying effects upon our dispatch. If one commodity source goes higher, then we will shift generation to a different commodity resource or a purchase power maybe in the market. So I want to emphasize that we have kept the dispatch the same here as calendar year 2020. And if you took that dispatch and increased the natural gas commodity cost across each hour of the year for all of that generation, you would add an additional $90 million in additional fuel costs. So again, we're thinking of that $484 million, but if gas costs across the whole year were increased by $1, you're adding another $90 million. And so what does that translate to from a residential bill perspective, where we started? So the next three bullets are a simple calculation of kind of what that estimate would look like. So if you've got calendar year retail sales in 2020, which you see there at the first bullet, about 20,914 gigawatt hours, if you take the $90 million that we just put together in the estimate and you divide through by those calendar year gigawatt hour sales, you get a factor of about 0.00434 per kilowatt hour. When you multiply that by a 1,000 kilowatt hour bill, that translates to about $4.34 a month. And so, so we can say that, generally speaking, again, this is a rule of thumb, dispatch is far more complex and interwoven than this as far as shifting between generation resources to take advantage of fuel costs. But generally, it would translate to about a $4.30 increase in a residential 1,000 kilowatt hour bill.
Moving to our 8th section of 9, a discussion on how the PSC and utilities can help keep gas costs. Thank you. Moving on to our 8th section of 9, the section talks about how the utilities and the commissions can help keep gas costs and prices down for customers. And reading the order and then reflecting on last week's commission business meeting, the company really has interpreted this as to how can the company help keep bills down? Because as you recognize, I mean, gas costs are what gas costs are. It's a deregulated market where supply and demand, pushes and pulls. And Ms. Jackson covers that at length in the PGA testimony, discussing, and she did this morning, really talking about how we source natural gas from different ways on the system. We enter into fixed transportation contracts to get gas here at a cost-effective rate. We've got LNG that I mentioned earlier to help with those peak demands, and then certainly there's the annual RSA proceeding that includes a very detailed and extensive audit by the Office of Regulatory staff to ensure that those cost of service items, the operating expenses, and those rate-based items and appropriate pro formas are made to the rates. I mean, there's a very extensive process behind those to help keep the gas prices down, but at the end of the day, it's a supply and demand. And what the company does focus on intently, moving to the next slide, is ensuring that customers are well aware of the energy efficiency programs that we have in place. So the company has 7 energy efficiency programs today serving residential, commercial, and industrial customers. What you'll see here is one of the more popular ones, and it's certainly one that we promote a great deal and can help customers today, in that a Building Performance Institute trained, BPI trained individual will physically come to a customer's home. It could be virtual. The customer could hold their phone with a video on, and we'll walk through that home and identify areas where there's possible leakage of that conditioned air inside the home, outside, and that serves both the winter and the summer, obviously. So think about sealing around windows and doors, an examination of attic insulation. There's also a number of installed measures. So it's not just, here's a box, please go do it. It is, we're going to do it. It's a replacement of 5 LED light bulbs. It's a water heater wrap. It is pipe insulation. And it's also a kitchen faucet aerator, replacement of it. The company gets this message out through an assortment of means. In the appendix, you'll notice a number of news releases that the company has issued this year around its energy efficiency programs, as well as a number of media engagement. I would like to add, however, that the company has integrated very tightly both our energy efficiency department and our customer assistance department. So I believe the commission has recently had the chance, to talk about the emergency rental assistance program, and the company has a wonderful manager that runs our customer assistance program. It's Christina Freeman. When she and her agents are out in the field and they're identifying or have identified a customer in need, not only do they get them the financial help that they need, but they also make recommendations to our energy efficiency program. So whether it be a home energy checkup, if appropriate, an appliance repair, rebates. Certainly there's low income programs to include the neighborhood energy efficiency program. That's a SWEET program, as well as direct mail of light bulbs. There's a suite of programs that the company intently reviews every year and is looking to grow over the upcoming years.
Okay, so messaging rate changes. Our fuel statute requires each year, we talked earlier about the impact of fuel on customer bills, but it requires that we notice customers of increases, and that is per the fuel statute. I will say to the commission that it's been our practice to notice customers of any changes in the rate, whether those be up or down. And we generally change our fuel rates in the spring of the year. It will be in May. And those changes usually coincide with any update, be that up or down, in the company's demand side management component and our pension cost component rider. So the intent there is to try to minimize changes in the rates and have stability there and not change them multiple times. So we do notice each of our fuel actions, whether they be up or down, and we furnish those notices through bill inserts or bill notifications for those customers who receive electronic bills. And if anyone is interested, we've put a website here where you can go and look at all of the company billing inserts that we've sent out, and those include fuel and any other inserts that we send out for customer bills. And then finally, all of our electric gas rates and tariffs are available online at the website you see there. And they're also available at the Commission's e-tariff website in that system as well.
So we certainly wanted to say thank you again for having us here today. We hope this presentation was what you were seeking. Would like to answer any questions. However, I do recognize I did overlook one item. Namely, there was an item in the list of 9 that talked about what other commissions might be doing or what other jurisdictions, and I wanted to comment, if I could, very briefly. The company is not aware of any actions in any other jurisdictions that commissions are handling the cost of gas in any unique way, whether that's the 16 states that Dominion Energy operates in. We certainly are aware of similarities. For example, when I discussed the weather normalization adjustment, the Utah group, the Dominion Energy Utah, has WNA that's very similar. There's a similar sort of mechanism in North Carolina. It's called the Customer Usage Tracker. It's not customer specific and doesn't have that exact WNA calculation, but it's more broad system level margins, and I believe it's in April and October rates can change upward or downward based off of really difference in sales volumes, which is driven by changes largely in weather. But outside of that, there really aren't any other actions in other jurisdictions that the company is aware of that commissions have addressed this specifically. With that, thank you.
Great presentation. Great job. Thank you for coming to share that information with us. All right. Commissioner questions. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. Thank you. I really do appreciate the eagerness with which you brought this information to us. I've got 2 questions. One is for Ms. Jackson. What's a greenfield pipeline?
A greenfield pipeline is a pipeline that is going over terrain that does not have any infrastructure, utility infrastructure in it today. If we are looking at a pipeline that may use existing right-of-way that a utility or another pipeline has, is commonly referred to as brownfield. So when you think of greenfield, just think of new facilities that are being constructed in that area.
Thank you. And Mr. Rooks, I think you were talking about, but it might have been Mr. Rafferty, about bill inserts for electronic customers. Could you talk through how you see that? And I'll admit I'm an electronic customer, and I've been watching a little bit more to see what it is I'm missing. Can you tell me more about how those are triggered with the receipt of electronic bills?
I created the eye contact, but I'm going to let Mr. Rooks talk about it.
Well, yeah. So it's actually a link that's provided.
Okay.
And so customers can go out there and click on a link with any notifications that may be there. And so they can click on a link, as I understand it. There's a hyperlink there that they can click on and go read the notice and be informed as to what activity may be going on or any kind of message that we are sending out to customers.
If I could add, there's an area of our website, and it's in the appendix here, that has all of the bill messages or bill inserts for the prior months. In addition to what Mr. Rooks described, many of our customers are downloading the Dominion Energy app, and that's a wonderful thing. And another thing I'd recommend, it certainly is very helpful when someone's experiencing a power outage. You don't have to fumble through, logging into the website and remembering a user ID or password. It's really like any other app that has the Face ID, and it'll give you an estimated restoration time and that sort of thing. But in addition, when you go into the billing area, there are the inserts for that month, so you can simply click on those inserts and see them.
Would it give you a notification, like how many inserts you haven't seen?
Yeah, kind of like an unread inserts.
Right.
Interesting concept, and I'll take it back. It doesn't do that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. No further questions.
Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Ms. Jackson, thank you for what you brought to us. You mentioned in some of this getting the gas to us. about continued opposition delay cost.
Yes, sir.
What is that exactly?
When a project is initially filed at FERC and the timeline is given, contracts are signed for materials and for labor. And so as these projects are delayed at the at the federal level or at the state level, there are costs associated with the delay in those costs, in those labor contracts and in the material contracts. And there's also legal costs associated with defending the project.
Okay, well, who is the opposition, I guess is what I'm asking.
There are a lot of different groups. There have been some environmental groups that are concerned about, say, the route of the pipeline project, and they want additional information. But it depends on what level that opposition occurs. Is it at the federal levels, the state levels, and the local levels? That can add, as you can see, from 3 years up to 7 years or more. So when you're looking at an incremental 3 to 4 year time frame of building a pipeline project, those costs continue to increase.
Okay. Well, like if there were a lawsuit trying to block sort
Yes,
of
sir.
thing,
Yes,
that's
sir.
something that the gas, who would be defending that? The utility wouldn't be involved directly in that, would they?
No, sir, but the pipeline, the company that is constructing the pipeline project that we may have signed a contract with, they would defend the project, but all of those costs get rolled up into the cost of the project.
Okay, and the time and money cost as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. One more question, Mr. Rafferty. I was very interested when you talked about the home energy checkup. I knew about that. I didn't know about this tier 2, about rebates for, let's say, attic insulation. So if I wanted to insulate my attic after your people came and looked at it or whatever, and they said, you really should do this, would you rebate my electric bill, or it's like if it costs a certain amount, you send a check, or how is that done for the customer, and then how is it reflected in cost to all ratepayers?
It's a great question, half of which I can answer. The other half I'm going to need to dance just a little bit. Related to the second part, how is it represented in the cost to all ratepayers? It certainly is captured as part of the energy efficiency program implementation costs, which goes through an annual filing concurrent with fuel. So February, you'll see an annual demand-side management application from the company, and that's where those costs are captured. They are then represented in rates through what we call a DSM rider, so that they are shared that way. As you know, each of the energy efficiency programs, with the exception of maybe low income, need to pass cost effectiveness tests. So although there is a rather significant rebate going out, there are more benefits than there are costs. So that there's that threshold that needs to be passed. And then certainly some programs take some time to get to be cost effective. Maybe year one, you're just getting it on its feet. It might take a little while. So there's a lot in that, and it's really covered in that demand side management application. The second component about the payment, would you pay a contractor, $4,000, and then the company would reimburse you 75%, or do they reimburse the contractor? I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know that. But I'm certain that link I provided for demand-side management programs would have that information. And if not, the demand-side management group could answer that.
So, and your expert would have a list of approved contractors, or?
Yeah, that has been a common challenge, regardless of the program, whether it's energy efficiency or maybe some sales thing in the past, which is whether or not the company would vet contractors. And there seems to be some risk in that, recommending someone without a certain level of certification. It just seems risky. I don't believe the demand side management group recommends contractors, but if I'm wrong, it would be on that website.
So a lot of this is brand new, or it's brand new to me anyway, this tier 2 stuff.
It probably is. However, because it was recently implemented, I think about a year or two ago, when we asked for an extension for our current demand side management programs. I think it was 2019. That's when this tier 2 came around. So kind of when I was describing, it takes a little while to get a program on its feet and for customers to know about it. That's what I'd attribute.
So, and it's not limited to low income.
No, not at all. Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions for our panel? All right, hearing none, we're complete with, or we have completed the commissioner questions. Anything from the panel, the company, Office of Regulatory Staff? No? All right, thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We are adjourned.
Thank you.